All right, coaches, welcome back. Another episode of the Minnesota Basketball Coaching Podcast. Guest today, rival coach, conference school, first conference coach that I've brought in from the Mississippi 8, Mike McDonald, Cambridge-Isanti head coach. Mike, thanks for joining us today.
Well, I guess I'm honored. I didn't realize I was the first conference coach invited to this podcast, Brett. So I guess for that reason, I'm very honored. You know, and like you said yesterday, as we're getting ready here, I think it was a tweet that I read that some people might be upset that us two rivals are talking it out a little bit. So yeah, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Way we always start, coaching Wikipedia page. So tell us where you're from, where you played, and what led you to the Blue Jackets bench.
Well, it's kind of a long story because I guess I've been doing this for a lot of years. I graduated from Chisholm High School on the Iron Range in 1975. My dad, Bob McDonald, of course, was my high school coach. 2 state championships, 1973, 1975, that I was honored to be on. Also a third place team in 74. Went to college, first to college at St. Olaf. Spent a year and a half at St. Olaf and then transferred to the University of Minnesota Duluth. Graduated from there in 1981 and then had 6 months as a long-term sub up in Hibbing, close to home. Went to a little town called Ascove, Minnesota, which doesn't have a school anymore, up by Sandstone. Spent a whole year, was an assistant on that staff, my first year out of first full-time job. And then lost my job because Ascove, was combining or closing school going to with East Central and Sandstone. So then looking around for a job in the early 80s and really couldn't find anything. And I had brothers and sisters that played out of South Dakota State. And I actually worked a camp out of South Dakota State and got to know Gene Zolk, who was the coach at South Dakota State. And I said, well, if you hear of anything out in South Dakota, let me know. And I ended up getting contacted by Gene, applied for a job out in Presho, South Dakota at Lyman High School. And it was there from 1982 to 1987. In the Great Plains, was a great experience for me. Small school, about 120 total high school students, spent 5 years, had some really good players, some really good teams, won a state championship in 1985 and out in South Dakota, and great years. And then in 1987, it's kind of a funny story here, but my oldest son, Rhett, was born. And of course, Rhett, the coach at Duluth East. And he was born as we were living out there, and my parents had never seen their first grandson at the time. So we journeyed to St. Paul during the state basketball tournament. Rhett was born in February. This was March, so he was a little over a month old. Went to the state basketball tournament in St. Paul to visit with my parents and watch the Minnesota State tournament. And needless to say, I was with my dad watching one of the games at the St. Paul Civic Center at the time, and needed to take a bathroom break. And in the bathroom ran into Al Bauman, the famous coach from Little Falls, who I had actually, as a high school player, played against. So we started talking, and he asked me, have you ever thought about coming back to Minnesota? And I said, well, if there was the right job. And it was Al Bauman who basically said, hey, there is a job open in Cambridge. And from that, I applied. And that was 33 seasons ago, now going on my 34th season here at Cambridge. It was Cambridge High School back in the 80s when I joined it. Now it's Cambridge-Isanti High School. So in a nutshell, that's how I ended up in Cambridge, and have put in 33 seasons and looking forward to number 34.
Coaching fate that you had to go to the bathroom, it sounds like, at that specific time.
Yeah, it was fate. It actually was. It actually was, because you think about it, if I wouldn't have gone there, I had no plans of looking around at the time. I had no plans of looking around for a new job. It was just fate. It just somehow I ran into him, and he told me about the job. And I remember talking to my wife Dayla and said, "Can I apply?" And we were happy out in South Dakota. It was a great little town and a great school and a great basketball community. And we decided that let's apply. And from there, journeyed back to Cambridge, interviewed, and was offered the job. So again, that's basically where it all started, Brett.
33 years at Cambridge and a handful more, like you mentioned, in South Dakota. How many career wins do you have?
I don't like to talk about it. I'm at 6 under 500 right now, let's say. So
I knew it was close, so I knew it was close. And with, we were just talking before we hit record. With who knows what the winter's going to look like, we might end up playing each other four or five times this year. So I know Henry got his 2000th against us last year or 2 years ago, his junior year, and I'll do everything I can and not let 500 happen, just so you know,
Yeah,
against
I figured
us.
that. I was just going to tell you, but I was hoping I could get my 500th when we play the Princeton Tigers. But
We might, the way it works, we might only play each other 17 times this year. We might just play every Tuesday, Friday, and just rotate and keep it on 95 to limit exposure. Who knows?
That 18-mile trip on Highway 95. Yeah, that might have to work out. You're right.
So you just mentioned on Twitter that you're retiring from teaching, correct?
Yeah, I think this is it. I'll be. A lot of things have entered in that. It's been it's going on 40 years of being a teacher in the classroom, and I love teaching in the classroom. I teach U.S. and world history. I enjoy teaching history. I enjoy both the U.S. and the world history, but it's the point in time, I think, where I can step back. I mean, it's next May I'll be turning 65, and my youngest son, Kyle, is now teaching, and he joined another rival, the Forest Lake Ranger staff. So he's teaching over in Forest Lake, and quite honestly, I do have him now off my family insurance, which makes decision-making a whole lot easier. So, yeah, I think at this point, I've kind of, let it be known through social media and through talking to people around our high school. This is probably going to be the last year for me. I'm planning on continuing to coach. I still love what I do with coaching, and Bill Bauman, basically, he showed me that for 8 years as being a member of my staff, that basically, that retired gig of just coaching is not that bad either.
Yeah, you could always tell, and we'll talk about Bill here at the end, as that came through as one of our Twitter questions. But you could always tell that in my brief conversation with Bill, that he always had teams pretty well scouted with his full-time coaching gig, and probably made film watching a lot easier for you.
Yeah, totally. And we'll talk about Bill later, but yeah, Bill was for the 8 years of the season, he took a lot of pressure off me. Bill said that was the best coaching job he ever had, being part of our staff. And of course, we're going to miss Bill as he steps aside this coming season. But Bill made it a whole lot easier for me, because he was my advanced scout. He was the guy that was watching film. His wife, Carol, according to Bill, was even a more avid film watcher, which he'd get on Huddle and watch film as well. So between the two of them, they watched a lot of film, and it made my life a lot easier, not having to watch as much film as I did. Bill would just tell me, hey, watch this, watch that, as we prepared for a game or watched our own team play on film.
You've went against your son in the section final last year, and you've had some, and I've joked about it on Twitter, some hotly contested battles with the Greyhounds. What is that like for you as a dad, especially in a section final situation where you know how important basketball is to rep, but also you're competitive, and you've coached against your dad and your siblings in games as well, and you know that during those 36 minutes you're trying to win the game, and you'll be dad and son afterwards. But talk about what goes into just what that experience is like, coaching against Rhett in a section final.
Yeah, well, yeah. As you just alluded to, Brett, coaching against your son is never easy. I mean, those are not easy games, because, like you said, we're in it to win. Both of us are in it to win, and somebody has to lose. That's the biggest problem, is that somebody needs to lose that game or will lose that game. And as a dad, you want him to have the very best. But I mean, playing in the section final, there's no doubt, you devote a lot of time and energy to your own players, your own kids, your own program, and you want your program to come out and win. I think, the biggest, I can handle that a little bit, and we all can handle that a little bit. Red can handle a little bit, but it's a very emotional, and because you put a lot of passion into it, it's very difficult. I know it's been very difficult on my wife, Dayla, and Rhett's mom, because she has to sit there and, of course, watch battle it out, and all the games that we have played basically have been real tough games. I mean, last year we beat the Greyhounds 3 times, but they're all emotional, tough games that came down to just a few possessions here and there.
So you've done this now for a long time. You mentioned you're racking up the career wins, getting close to a big milestone. Talk about how your philosophy has evolved over time from when you first started coaching in South Dakota to this past season section championship in 2020.
Well, yeah, that's a great question, because it's been approximately 37 years as a head coach. I think a lot of my upbringing The beginnings of my basketball philosophy came from probably my dad, Bob McDonald, because in playing for him and watching and being associated with that program from a very young kid until the time I was a player, I think a lot of things that my dad did up in Chisholm were at least the backbone of where I came from. I mean, we up in Chisholm, we did a lot of zone pressing, that kind of stuff. We shot the ball, we run and gun, transition game, all that kind of stuff. So it was very up tempo in my upbringing. From then to South Dakota, I think I took those things and probably did much the same. The full court pressure, the fast pace, that kind of stuff. And then coming to Cambridge, I remember coming to Cambridge, it was a little bit different because when I got here in 1987 with that kind of style of play, I found out that my first year was my lineup was not conducive to play run and gun. We were very short-handed, let's say, on having guards, but we had some real big kids that were very football player-like, and basically had to probably change a little bit to try to make things work. But eventually, in the 90s, etc., we began to develop our program, develop a philosophy of play, which is probably similar to the pace that I had played early in my career, but now we're to that point. I think the major thing, though, that has changed the game, Brett, is probably the 3-point strike. When I was in high school, of course, we didn't play with the 3-point stripe. I would have loved to play with the 3-point stripe when I was in high school. But then as you get away to basically the 3-point stripe today, I remember the first year that I had the 3-point stripe was the 1987 season out in South Dakota. South Dakota was actually 1 year ahead of Minnesota. My first year in Minnesota, the 1988 season, was the first year of the 3-pointer. But now you look at how the 3-point shot has changed the game. And of course, as you look at the way our teams play, and you know it too, we have had teams that really like to shoot the three, and I think that will continue.
So you talked about the 3-point line. I want to build off that a little bit. One thing that I've, been impressed with that you mentioned at, getting on 65 years old here, coaching now for 37 years, you're one of the more active coaches that I follow on liking and retweeting things on social media. And just talk about how you, as a more experienced coach, are still able to go back to the drawing boards, do a little research, and use social media to improve your coaching.
I think social media for all coaches is important. I think it's probably as more important for probably that young coach. As a coach that's been doing it for as long as I do I use social media? Yes, I do. What am I looking for? Probably little tweaks here and there. Maybe a new out of bounds play, maybe from the sideline or baseline out of bounds. Maybe it's a little different action that we could use within our program. I think we're pretty well set with our system of play here at Cambridge-Isanti. With the way we play, but there's always little things that you can look at. I think too, individual development, skill development. There's so much on social media that you could use for maybe drills for skill development, maybe in your off season or within your practices. And as a coach, I think you and I know that as a coach, you must always be learning. I mean, there's always new things to learn. And I think social media is a very good vehicle to learn new things. And yeah, I use social media a lot. Basketball Immersion, I'm a member of that. Coach's Toolbox, I get a lot of ideas out of that. And just watching Twitter and things like that for different things. And to this day, Bill Bauman and I basically still share things to each other. Even though Bill has kind of retired from my program, we are in daily contact where he sees a new drill or he sees a new action or a new out of bounds play or something like that. So we're always looking for new things, new ideas, and all coaches need to do that basically. And I think especially those that are trying to establish their footprint, maybe a younger coach.
I think you hit on the head when you mentioned trying to find ways to tweak or just slight improvements or small adjustments that you can make throughout the season. Because I think that, and I've talked this with, I know, especially with your nephew when I had Bryce on a long time ago, one of the first guests, was you can really drown in what's out on social media and on Infastra. And if you can, you see something over the weekend, you're now all of a sudden trying to put 4 new plays in on Monday for your Tuesday game. It can be extremely counterproductive to your program. But what I've been so impressed with, like you mentioned with, adding things to tweak your program, is you guys definitely have a clear program identity. It's on Twitter. It's on every T-shirt you see a Cambridge-Isanti basketball player have, and that's Havoc. So why don't you talk a little bit about what that means, what that philosophy is, that for those that aren't familiar with the Blue Jacket philosophy of Havoc.
Yeah, thank you. And basically, that established a few years ago. We came up with that Havoc moniker just a couple of years ago. We felt we had everything in place to play the style of basketball that we wanted to play. And you and I know we are strong believers in our matchup defense. Which is kind of unique and that a lot of, again, what the style of play and that matchup that we play, for matchup defense that we play. And notice I don't call it the matchup zone. Some people call it a matchup zone. I think we just call it the matchup here at Cambridge-Isanti. But a lot of that credit goes to Bill Bauman again, because Bill and I were rivals for many years. I mean, Bill was at North Branch. I was at Cambridge-Isanti. The thing that basically occurred was a lot of times I opened my season playing in North Branch. For whatever reason, we always played North Branch and Bill Bauman's teams first. The biggest difficulty, of course, was preparing for his matchup defense. And, because preparing for that is sometimes more unique than any other defense that you play. And prior to that, I used to play a lot of man-to-man, switching some zones, switching man-to-man. But what I liked about the matchup was that it allowed us to basically have rules that we didn't have to worry. For example, man-to-man on ball screens. Are you going to switch? Are you going to hedge? Are you going to soft hedge? Are you going to hard hedge? All of that. We have rules that once our kids understand that we can play it that way. Using the Havoc philosophy and incorporating our matchup, then it was more defensively extending our matchup, looking into full court pressure, full court trap. And then on the offensive end, it's all about pushing the basketball, playing with pace, getting spacing. We talk about 4-point spacing a lot. A lot of people say, they talk about spacing. We use the philosophy. I think the 76ers and Brett Brown were the first ones that we heard about it, that we actually talk about 4-point spacing, that instead of 3-pointer, we want to be outside that to really space the floor. And then, of course, look to shoot the three, look for drive lanes, double gaps, that kind of stuff and then, of course, penetrate and kick back out to three or penetrate to the basket. But I think Havoc is more that defensive philosophy of pressure, but also incorporating the pace of the game and getting up and down the floor as fast, as quickly as possible, and trying to look for those first scoring opportunities.
I definitely want to talk about your guys' tempo and the pace of play that you guys have, but I want to take a step back on the offensive side first and talk about shooting. Your team always shoots lights out, and you got guys who, we watch as sophomores who are maybe we play them twice. They go 1 for 5 in the 2 games. All of a sudden, their junior year, they're shooting 45% from 3. And so how do you teach shooting in your program? Because you got guys who every year take leaps and bounds, who maybe one guy we're sagging off of him as a bench player as a sophomore, then a junior. Now we got to get out to. Now there's a senior year, we can't help off of him. So we've seen, playing you guys 2 times a year, seen a lot of film, obviously, with our conference film exchange, that you have guys develop immensely as shooters. So what are some of your philosophies when teaching shooting in your program?
Well, and again, that has evolved over time. Number one, I think within our program, we have kids that have shot a lot, and that you're not going to get to be a better shooter without time and effort. I can use Henry Abraham, for example, and Henry's probably not the greatest example in many ways, because Henry was superb when it came to shooting the basketball. But the point is that Henry put a lot of time in the off season shooting the basketball. And sometimes that idea, what leads to shooting success is just the idea that to be successful at shooting, people use the example of Henry Abraham, that if I want to be successful, I have to put in the time. So I think within the program, we that we have kids that have put in the time. We have a 10,000 shot off-season program that we're actually doing online now. You've probably seen that. We have some of our players have and we count shots made rather than shots missed. So we have some of my players, last I looked, were up there about 80,000 shots made, and some of these were 9th graders that are just entering our program. So, and we have others less than that. But I think number one, throughout the program, we have people that understand that shooting the basketball is very important. I think our style of play leads to that too, because you and I know if two shots that kids like to take when they jump into the gym. Number one, dunk, and number two, shoot the three. And I think the way we play has given the message to our kids, hey, for us to be successful in this program, we got to be able to shoot it. Now we do a lot of drills in practice too. We have we talk about shooting off the hop, for example, 2 feet together, which I'm a believer at. I also think the player needs to shoot the 1-2 step as well, because I think if you can shoot the hop and the 1-2 step, it makes you very effective with your footwork. We spend a lot of time with footwork. In a practice situation, of course, it's a little bit harder because on our main floor, for example, we have our JV on one floor, our varsity on the floor, and our 9th grade on the 3rd floor. We don't have a whole lot of baskets, but each and every day we spend time, and a lot of our shots actually in a practice situation are 3-point shots. Or it's finishes at the rim. We don't do a whole lot, as you know, we don't do a whole lot of work on mid-range stuff, and that's just our philosophy of play.
You mentioned that you're a big basketball immersions fan, and you mentioned the subscription, and there's a ton of drills and there's a ton of stuff in there that you can just like dive into, obviously as a subscriber to that. But what are some of the main shooting drills? You mentioned you're limited on space. Your varsity team doesn't have 20 hoops to shoot at in a practice. So what are some of the drills that you're using in practice that you found has allowed your guys to have the most success in developing in their shooting?
We do a lot of stuff, 3-ball, 2-man stuff. We'll shoot spots a lot of times. We'll shoot either a 5-spot or 7-spot, usually a 5-spot drill where we'll shoot corners, and we'll partner shoot a lot, even though that sometimes we'll have one of our other teams clear out another basket so we can put another 4 guys, 2 pairs at a basket. We shoot a lot of spots. We try to keep track of how many we're shooting. We'll shoot spots with groups of 3, maybe 3-ball, 2-ball, where we're going to keep track again. We'll compete. I think it's important to compete when you're shooting in practice. Have groups that are competing against each other, because then it makes it better. I think, we try to do within our offensive system, our passing game offensive system, we do shooting drills, where we're going to do pop back shooting and things like that. So we do some actions of our offense, but it leads to 3-point shots too. So we try to, within our system, do a lot. And even in our defensive drills, where we're working on matchup, of course, we're looking to get shots up against defenders in that case too. So I think we spend a lot of time, each and every day we spend a lot of time shooting the basketball. I don't know, a lot of time for us might mean several drills of maybe a half hour total within a 2-hour practice situation. And a lot of our emphasis is actually shooting threes, just because of the way we play.
You mentioned your offensive tempo, and you guys have been one of the higher scoring teams in Class 4A. Obviously, Henry Abraham, who just graduated, 3,000-point score, going off and playing Division I basketball at Eastern Illinois. What are some of the coaching points, though, that you have in practice when you're installing? I know you run your passing game in the half court, and we'll talk about that here next. But transition-wise, what are some of the things what are some of the roles or responsibilities that you guys have within your transition offense? And then how are you drilling that and repping that in practice?
Well, we do that. We do this every day. We usually start a practice with what we call a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 drill, which the group of 5 will have 5 trips up and down the floor. It's really a 5-on-0 type of situation. In our transition game, or our fast break game, or our tempo game, we do have designated spots that our players run to, and we try to fill both corners. We try to get the ball. Well, I think it's very important to basically get the ball inbounded as quickly as possible. If you're going to run an effective transition game or up-tempo basketball, that ball, once it goes to the net or is turned over, you got to get it going. And we have a designated guy. Usually it takes the ball out of bounds. We try to get it across half court in 2 seconds in practice. And try to advance the ball up the sideline if possible to try to get into our transition game. We have a rim runner typically. Typically we have a rim runner that runs the rim, and that's usually what we call our 4 or 5 man. Our 4 man is usually our big guy that runs the rim. and our 5-man is our trailer. So we have a trailer, and that 5-man inbounds the ball, and we get up and down the floor. Everybody has a designated spot. I think getting that ball out of the basket or getting that ball inbounded is so important. Getting it across the half line is important. And I think all players have to understand in transition basketball that it is probably those first couple of steps in that defensive backcourt that are important. That's where you have to get out and run. It's not, you can't run after you get across. You can't jog to half court. Your wings, for example, on that change of possession really have to get out and have to get to their spots. In our case, get to their spots and get it going. You can't, it's very important. Otherwise, you're not going to have an effective transition game or effective pace of play.
You make a good point there about those first couple of steps, because I feel like so many teams or coaches want to play fast, and you've seen it. You've seen teams on film, December, their first couple games, they're playing fast. But then all of a sudden by January, their scores are in the 50s because it's a lot of work to play fast, and it's constant movement, right? You can't have your guys jogging down the court on offense. And so I think that's a huge point that you mentioned, was those first couple of steps. And it has to be every possession. It can't just be off of steals or on misses. It has to be on makes. And that's where I think your team, obviously, the first time we played this past year, and you're up by like 75 or something at halftime. And then obviously we played 3 days later, and it was a clank fest for both teams on the President's Day Monday when no one had school, double overtime game. But what's always been so impressive watching your teams, especially when when we scout you guys, we really like to focus on and no knocking the conference schools by any means. We like to watch your Andover, your Blaine, your Forest Lake games where you're playing maybe some bigger, stronger, faster 4A programs to see what you guys do, because we figure if you're doing it versus them, that's probably a similar type of look that we're going to get. And just every single possession, your guys get out and run. And that's why I feel like your team has gone and is able to roll off especially in the past couple of years, a 15-2, 11-1 run in about 90 seconds, because you guys constantly are moving and constantly running. So I think that's something that in watching your teams play is so important, and it happens 36 minutes. Your guys are running. I want to move into the half court now and talk about the passing game. I know this is kind of a collaboration piece with Coach Bauman. So just talk about your general half court philosophy. You mentioned now transition, getting it out quick, getting it across half court in 2 seconds. But what is your main actions? What are your main looks as you get into the half court?
Yeah, our basic set, we might run a rim runner, but that rim runner is going to be just one of many other players. I think our philosophy, first of all, is our offense is positionless. Okay. Yeah. Even though we'll have a post player typically on the defensive end or a bigger kid on the defensive end, we typically believe that all of our players have to be positionless. I think that's the key, because if you have people that have a difficulty shooting the ball, first of all, in our offense, of course, we want to open up the lanes for cuts, etc. So we'll basically be a 5-out eventually after our transition game, and then we're looking at staggered screens, double staggered screens. We're looking at curls. We're looking at slips. We're looking at basket cuts. And what we try to basically work with our players is that everything has to be unpredictable. I started I know Bill Bauman was much the same. And like you said, this was a collaboration with Bill Bauman. A lot of his ideas, not only defensively, but offensively. But basically, I started, years ago running flex offense. Okay. The flex offense. And the problem with flex offense, as you know, is that when people start switching the flex, it gets a little bit more difficult to run the flex. And so then I remember as a coach running flex, okay, what are we going to do when they start switching? What actions are we going to do with switching? And we had a few of those actions. When Bill Bauman came into our program, of course, that brought in really more of the passing game, which, as you know, has flex actions, but other actions as well, open post actions, that kind of stuff. And I think our offense became more predictable. As you know, we do have cutters, but there's always people spacing out. Again, I talked about 4-point spacing. So we'll have, a short curl, hard curls, swim cuts, as we call them, all that kind of stuff that opens up our play. And our goal here is to make whoever's defending us have a hard time communicating, because, as you know, defense is communication. If you have a hard time communicating, if you're going to be switching, for example, or staying or stuff like that, and you're very unpredictable, it makes you harder to guard. And then,
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. You go
No,
ahead.
so you mentioned your swim cut. I want you to elaborate on that, and I want you to first off, though, answer. So I think I mentioned this when maybe I've mentioned to you or Bill before, but how we always scout you guys, the one that we always have the hardest time with, we call it your rock, paper, scissor cut.
Mhm.
It's kind of your convergence action on the block. We honestly just tell our guys, they just kind of play rock, paper, scissor, and then one guy uses the flex screen, one guy uses the down screen, and it seems like there's really no rhyme or reason. So is that your swim cut? And if not, what is the actual terminology so we can stop calling it the rock, paper, scissor action?
It's just passing game action, Brett, as what you can see. And let's say we have a guy in the corner and there's two screeners coming down for him. Basically, and I'm gonna keep this as unpredictable for you as possible because
Yes, by all means, go for it.
doubting on us right now. So but anyway, when those two screeners come down, the guy using the screen has options. And if you have two screeners coming down, he could swim. Our swim cut is he goes underneath both screens. Our short curl is curls around the first screener, and our long curl is where he can go around the two screeners, and then there's a straight pop, you can come off straight to the top too. And so there's basically four options for every guy using screens. If he has a stagger, single screens, much the same. You can curl, you can swim underneath, which is kind of a flex cut, I guess you could call it, or you could come right back out to the top. A lot of it, of course, using our offense is our players need to kind of read the defense. Basically, a lot of for us to be effective, our players have to read the defense. Where is the defense playing you? Is he playing you up top? Therefore, you should swim. Is he trailing you? Therefore, you should curl. Where is he playing you? And I think that takes a lot of time. I mean, it takes a lot of time to basically get your players to understand what kind of cut is going to be most effective. And we spend a lot of time, with 3-on-3, 4-on-4 action. Much of our practice is very little full court. And Bill Bauman, probably you've heard him talk before too. Bill, we spend very little time in full court. We might do an offense, a defense, an offense, 3 trips. And we don't spend a whole lot of time in just, let's say, open court scrimmaging. We'll maybe once in a while we'll mix it up, we do, but it's a lot of times our practice is based in the half court, both on offense and both on defense. And I think that's where you can nail it down. You say, well, what do you do for conditioning? We don't run lines very often. The only time we run lines is when we're upset with effort as coaches with our players. They're sluggish. We got to get their attention somewhere. Through all of our drills and using transition and our pace of play, we feel that our players can get conditioned into our practice by just showing effort in our pace of play on both ends. So that's basically, talking about our offense. That's really that paper, rock, scissors. We want to be unpredictable. We want to have all cuts and keep the defense guessing as to what cut they have to try to defend.
Let's switch to the defensive side of it here. I'd love to talk offense all day, but we'll give some defense time because you guys are unique on that side of the ball or that side of the court as well. And one thing that, again, you guys do a really good job of is you guys keep their feet moving nonstop on defense. Their feet never stop moving. And you don't, and I think I'm not saying anything that you wouldn't say. You don't have the best athletes in the state by any means. I think you got kids who work their ass off, who are bought into the system, and they're good athletes, good basketball players, but they truly buy into the system and the style of play that you guys have. And so what are some ways that you kind of condition your kids to keep their feet moving on defense? And then also, what are some of your rules on when to jump passes and when to try to turn the team over?
I think there's a lot of stuff there. I think in practice wise, again, we do a lot of in our defense. We have breakdown drills where we'll start maybe a 3-on-3 defensive drill. We're playing our matchup principles, which is really, as you look at it, it's switching man to man with a lot of communication. Last year, you look at my last year's team, for example, we had Connor Broughton, who's about 6'4", 6'5", and then after that we were loaded with seniors. But if you looked at our team in warmups, we were not very impressive as athletes. We had a bunch of guys that were about probably sub 6 foot tall or sub 6 foot tall. But the thing is with guys like Henry Abraham, of course, Michael Ladd, for example, Paul Swanson. The thing that made us effective last year, 24 wins, was that these kids all bought into each other and they understood our defense and played their role so well. So, I think that's important, that number one, you have to understand our defensive system. I think you mentioned it right, where we don't stop our feet. We do a lot of like disadvantage drills defensively. Maybe it's 5-on-4, where our kids got to just hustle all over and take the next pass and close out and keep our feet moving and get to the help side and principles like that. So I think in a practice, a lot of our defensive drills are, maybe we start 3-on-3, then we might go 4-on-3, 4-on-4, 5-on-4. We might have a drill where 5-on-4 with a guy standing out of bounds, and on the change of possession, then it becomes a 5-on-5 going down the other end. Then it would be a 5-on-5 coming back to us, and then we'll switch. We do a lot of drills like that try to incorporate all of our defensive principles, whether it be small-sided games, so to speak, or disadvantage situations or transition situations, things like that. And then another, we call it 10 minutes of havoc or 10 minutes of hell. Some of my guys like to refer to it as 10 minutes of hell, where we're for 10 minutes, it could be a 4-on-4 game where we have like an 8-second shot clock, and you have to press and you have to look to double. And we have maybe a team of 6, there's 2 subs, and you have to sub yourselves out. We just go up and down for 10 minutes, and we keep score, and we do burpees or push-ups afterwards for losers to keep there. And we're just looking to push the ball and trap and running back and forth, which ends up at the end of our practice a lot of times, ends up as a great competitive conditioner. And we'll do that a lot. Our kids love the drill. I mean, even this summer, the few workouts we have with our kids, they were always asking, can we play the 10 minutes of havoc at the end? Because it is a totally fast pace. And we'll count down a shot clock, one of my assistants or myself, and usually it's an 8-second shot clock where they have to get a shot off in 8 seconds. And we do other drills with that too. And that really creates the pace of our practice and then works on the conditioning piece of it too, Brett.
I'll spare you some of the details of your matchup zone since you don't want to give me a free scout, and I totally understand that. I do want to ask this one question about your matchup defense. You mentioned it's kind of like switching. Give me a quick summary on how your matchup defense, or the matchup like you mentioned, is different than a switching man defense.
Well, I think the biggest thing, I think is very similar. I think we don't stay. If a guy, for example, if you're guarding a guy at the top and he passes and cuts, we don't follow that guy. We don't follow. We'll follow him to a certain point, and then we'll give him up to another player, and then we'll look for the guy that fills that next spot or that next pass. So on the ball, very much has man-to-man principles. We do switch ball screens a lot. We've doubled ball screens at times if we want to double off ball screens. We've actually worked last year on icing ball screens a little bit, but we're basically in the situation where we do switch a lot of ball screens. If it's a down screen, of course, that's an easy switch for us. But I think the basic difference between a switching man-to-man and our matchup is, what do we do with cutters? Basically, again, like I said before, when a ball is passed, our defender is told to jump to the ball. We don't like to give any face cuts. He'll take him, the cutter will go down into the paint or that free throw line area. Then we'll give him up to the next player, and we'll then jump to that next pass. And that's where we try to get aggressive with trying to take away that next pass. It's all about ball pressure too. We talk about to a lot of our kids too in our defense, and it's any defense, that we expect to put ball pressure on the basketball to try to create a poor pass. If your hands are down, for example, we talk about high hands a lot, at least one high hand, and we talk about putting ball pressure on, mirroring the basketball, all that kind of stuff, to put pressure on the basketball to make that next pass tougher. And that next pass could be a perimeter pass or a pass into the paint. But I think the basic difference between switching man-to-man and our matchup is that cutting aspect, what we do with cutters.
For those listening to this on their prep here Monday morning, we're recording this at right now. It's 11:35 on Sunday, so we're kind of up against kickoff with the Vikings Packers here. So I got a few more questions here for Mike, and then we'll go on our ways and watch the Vikings game here. But K through 12, like I mentioned earlier, you guys have the Havoc shirts on when I've seen your youth teams, there's Havoc, and it's in the crowd, and it's maybe from an opponent's perspective, it's bothersome and annoying. But you know what? When you take a step back and look at the culture that you've created there in Cambridge, it's what all of us, all the coaches, what we should all strive for is that unifying term or that unifying mentality or philosophy within our program. So talk about what that looks like on the offensive, defensive side within your, work ninth grade level on down into your youth ranks.
Yeah, I think, and quite honestly, our system is difficult. Don't get me wrong. I think you're a brand new player that is, let's say we had a transfer that came into our program. I think picking up our defensive offensive system will not be easy because there's a lot of rules. When Bill Bauman came to our program in 2013 and I said, hey, we made the decision between Bill and I, we're going to play the matchup. We're playing the matchup. And needless to say, we play the matchup as our primary defense throughout the game. Very rarely will we jump to man. We did do some weird things against Duluth East in the section final game that made our defense look more man-to-man because of some of the actions that they did. We had to try to adjust our matchup too. But I think number one is, like I said, it's difficult. Our defense is difficult to understand. At the ninth grade level, many of our players are first exposed to the matchup. We try to teach it. A lot of times where we start is we try to teach a switching man-to-man. That's where it all starts. Teach a switching man-to-man, maybe do some more zone pressing as such, and go from there. As we get down into the lower levels, our middle school programs, of course, middle school programs basically are, a lot of times they're under rules that say you have to play man-to-man. And the matchup, even though I would say it has a lot of man-to-man principles, it probably wouldn't work even to play it at the middle school level because of some of the rules that are there. So, but I think it's very important as we get into our younger levels that number one, they have to be able to play man-to-man. I think that's where it all has to start. I guess you can win as a youth coach by playing zone. You can win, but as a high school coach waiting for players to come out of your youth levels, I think it's important. Number one, your players have to play man-to-man. Can they play switching man-to-man at your youth levels? Yes. Do we try to get them to do that? Yes. Offensive-wise at our youth levels, our passing game is difficult. Where do we like to start with? Maybe some flex action. Flex action at the youth levels that will lead eventually to playing passing game at our high school level. And we try to use our passing game principles with our ninth graders and, of course, just ramp it up a little bit as we get to the varsity level.
One of the questions that came through on Twitter was fitting system to players or having your players fit your system. Now, you mentioned you have the Broughton kid back, who I know is a good athlete, quarterback of the football team, and kind of just the guy that did a lot for you that maybe didn't show up in this stat. Micah Ladd was scoring, Henry Abraham was scoring a lot. You had the shooters off the bench, but Broughton was the one who I felt like did a lot of stuff. And he was able to guard some bigs that you guys went against, provide a little bit of a rim protection. When maybe your defense would get broken down or maybe teams would break the press or whatever the case may be, you return him, but you have big roster turnover this year. JV team was pretty solid, but talk about, how will you change things? Will you try to continue to fit the players to your system, or will you tweak things to fit the players that are coming in?
That's good. I think you always have to tweak it a little bit, but I think throughout our program, I think that Havoc system, our system of play, is an exciting way to play. I think it's come to our players know that that's how we want to play, and that's how they would want to play. I think most of our players want to play that system. It's an exciting way to play. So will the players fit the system? I think they know that they have to work on their skills to basically fit in our system. Will we tweak our system to fit players from year to year? Yes. Years ago, we had a team. We had a big guy by the name of Luke Johnson, for example, and you remember Luke. He was a big wide body inside. Therefore, our offensive system ended up being a little bit different than it was, let's say, last year with the ability to shoot and our quickness and things like that. So, yes, we'll always tweak, but in my feeling, I love the way we played the last few years, the pace of play, the pressure defense, and I think the expectations are that our players know that for them to be successful in their program, they got to get ready to play that type of style. We'll make some tweaks, but I don't think we're going to change our style, even with a big roster turnover. We're not going to change our style of play and go backwards. I love the system that we play, our defense and offensive systems, and we're going to continue that. And I hope our players, and I think our players understand, and all of our people, our youth understand that, hey, watching us play that way is the way I want to play when I play with the Blue Jackets.
I'll trade you some inside information from our program since you're graciously coming on here and spewing the stuff, the inside of the Blue Jackets program. We plan on playing the same way as well. And so I think when we had our YouTube live stream of our second game, I want to say, and you mentioned this, that this was the tipping point to get the huddle focus up in your gym was our game the second time we played. I think we had like 250, 300 people that watched that live. So come watch the Tiger Blue Jacket game. If and when that happens down the road, we might play you guys 5 times. Who knows what the schedule will look like in the winter, but clearly it's going to be another up-tempo game. A couple quick hitters here. We mentioned Bauman the last couple or throughout this episode. You mentioned he's 8 years in the program as an assistant with you, was a rival coach for a long time from the old Rum River Conference days. Talk about what he meant to your program and then how you're going to fill his void on your bench.
Yeah, that's a good question, Brett. And, I was very thankful that I had Bill. Like you said, we started as rivals, 14 miles apart, Cambridge to North Branch, and he started as rivals. And I think, and quite honestly, there was a time in our careers where because of that rivalry and competitiveness, we probably didn't get along very well. Back in summer of 2013, my son Rhett, for example, I was actually one of my assistants had stepped down. And I went down to watch my nephew play baseball in southwestern Minnesota. I was on my way home, and Rhett called me, and he was the one that came up with the idea that, hey, why don't you give Bill Bauman a call? And I was looking for a system, and I called Bill, and we sat down and met and talked about philosophy. And from there, started 8 years of a great Bill was a great addition to our program, but also Bill and Carol, his wife, have become our best friends. It was just a great situation. And for Bill to step down, I knew that. Bill told me several years ago that, hey, he's going to hang in there until Henry Abraham and his teammates were done. And so I knew that after last year, it would be probably the year for Bill. Bill was driving from, you think about this, Bill lives in St. Cloud. It was easier for him when he lived in North Branch, but now he lives in St. Cloud. And driving that 95 each and every day to get to practice in Cambridge had to be monotonous. You've been on Highway 95, right?
Not much there.
Not much there. And again, so I think that, and I knew that it was time. And Bill has a son, Brad, that coaches girl in Royalton, has a granddaughter and things like that. So I knew that Highway 95 drive would eventually come to an end. So there is a big void, but Bill and his work for our program and my camaraderie with him. And I think he has put us a solid footing. We have our assistants in our program that are well aware of our style of play and our system of play now. And we're going to miss Bill a lot. And I'll miss Bill a lot. I'll miss Bill because I used to look forward to, at about 2:00, I had last hour prep every day, and Bill would come on over. And before practice started, let's say at 3:00, Bill and I could sit down and we could just talk X's and O's and practice together, or talk or watch film together or whatever like that for that hour prior to. I'm going to miss those days, having that void of Bill not coming over. But I do know, we, like you said, we have huddle focus now in our gym too. And we just put it up this summer, and we actually did a try run, taped one of our practices, and Bill will probably still be a member of our huddle team over it. And I know this summer he was watching practice, and of course I was getting notes from Bill as he watched practice. So he'll still evaluate what we're doing, I'm guessing. And I'm looking forward to his continued evaluation, because I know he will still watch us, and he has still a huge connection with our program.
So last night I was watching the Twins game, and I pulled a 32 going on 72 moment. Bottom of the 8th inning, Twins hit back-to-back home runs. Rosario hits a 2-run home run. Sano hits a home run, goes up 8-4. I fall asleep, woke up. The post game was on. I was like, oh, they won. Look at my phone. I got about 7 notifications throughout the McDonald family talking about some sort of dance-off related thing. So getting right, cut to the chase. Who's a better dancer, you or Rhett?
Well, that's he was talking a little trash. I think
he was.
One of the things that came out last night, Red is a very good dancer, but, he was saying that he kind of gave me the onus that I was a better dancer than my wife, Dela. That's a tough one there because she would claim, and she does claim, that she's a far better dancer than me. So I think maybe Rhett got his dance moves a little bit from his mom as well, even though Rhett said it was me. I grew up during the disco years of the 70s, and I was a young guy in the 70s in my teens or early 20s. So, I thought I was a pretty good dancer back then. But, when you don't practice, it's like the game of basketball. If you don't practice your dancing, I think that is, you're going to lose your skills a little bit. Red, I think, spends a whole lot of time practicing. He must practice those dance moves before he got on TikTok the other day because actually, if you know my son Red, a little story about him, even as a young kid, he was a great choreographer of dancers. He'd have my daughter Kaylee and her friends, and he'd be the choreographer for him. So Red's skills at dancing is much more than his dance skills. He's got a lot of choreography skills too.
All right, Mike. Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing that story that I'm sure Rhett's going to be extremely thrilled that's going to be out there. So hopefully there's a lot of information here. Hopefully everyone makes it to the last minute to hear really the most important part of this episode was hearing about Rhett's career as a choreographer for his little sister and her friends. So, Mike, I appreciate it. Take care, stay safe, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
I hope to see you soon, Brett. Thank you very much for having us. We'll look forward to seeing the Tigers in the future.
See you, Mike.